Good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so you see how our show goes. And I want to welcome our guest, Leah, Gunn, Barrett. I'm going to move you over. Barrett, there we are, Barrett. So we're a little informal here, but we've got our commentator, Lorraine, on the phone. Commentator Lorraine, you there?
Yeah, I can't see her yet, but she looks very beautiful.
Yeah, she is beautiful. So let us ask you, so thank you for coming to our show, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to pretend to start the show over again and welcome you to our show.
Apologize for being late.
That's okay. It's perfectly all right. It's you're on time, actually. So
Okay, good.
We started our show because you are with an organization called the New Yorkers Against Gun Violence.
That's right, yes.
So how long have you been in existence?
Since 1993.
Okay. And your middle name?
Yes, it's a Scottish clan.
Okay.
It's a Highland clan, and I understand they were warlike, but I am not.
Okay, excellent. So we were talking a little bit about gun violence, and of course, guns have come up a lot in the last couple of weeks. There's been the Penn Station shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bodega outside my house, literally at 8 o'clock last Wednesday. Someone was shot in the head, and the guy ran off. And since I've lived there, I was saying to the audience that it's been about 11 years. I've had like maybe 4 or 5 instances of gun violence near me.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems to get more and more random. And I was sort of, I'm taking a long time to get to the question, but layering on top, we did a show where we interviewed a 16-year-old kid maybe a year ago who built a gun off the internet. He showed us the gun. He bought the pieces off the internet. He kind of put it together on the air from his home in Connecticut.
3D printing.
Yeah, and then you add drones to it where you just attach a gun and can fly it up and pull the remote trigger and shoot someone and blow the drone up and no one chases me. All that's here now. So it's not pretend land, ladies and gentlemen. And how do you sort of reconcile your work in your anti-gun violence organization fighting on the New York level, but the holes of the strainer are so big?
Yeah, well, we have to actually try to plug the biggest holes in the strainer, which we have had trouble plugging at the federal level since 1993. The last significant piece of federal legislation for gun safety were the Brady background checks, requiring every gun purchaser to undergo a federal background check, which if you think about it, is kind of common sense.
Yes.
You don't want guns falling into the hands of criminals, domestic abusers, or seriously mentally ill. So that's actually a fairly low bar. It doesn't even think about people who have maybe violent misdemeanor convictions.
Sure, or even someone with a bad temperament. Like
right.
I'm surprised.
Someone who has anger issues.
Well, I mean, Mr. Trump talks about him carrying a gun, and I always thought, okay, just put aside who he is. Would I give a gun to a person like that? You don't have to answer that, of course, but it's just a thought of the hole is big.
It's very big. So the first thing you need to do is try to plug the most obvious hole, which is to require criminal background checks at this fairly low bar for private gun sales, sales at gun shows, sales on the internet.
Okay.
Okay. But Congress refuses to do that. So you're seeing states take the lead. Oregon, Washington State now have background checks. Washington, it was a referendum. Oregon, it was actually a state bill that was signed by the governor. New York plugged the hole. We used to have background checks on just licensed gun sales and gun shows, but now in 2013, after Sandy Hook, we have the SAFE Act, which is actually requiring background checks for all gun sales. The exception being a transfer between family members, which I think probably should not be an exception, but it is. So if every state had New York's gun laws and we had those at the federal level, you would see a decrease in gun violence, because the problem we have in America is that it's too easy to get your hands on a gun.
Okay, so, but you said if all 50 states are as good as New York, so that's never going to happen.
Well, I think it will eventually. You see, states like New York, it's like any social movement. If you look at same-sex marriage, the civil rights movement, where did that start? It didn't start in Washington. It started at the state level.
Yes.
Stonewall for same-sex marriage. So New York is actually leading the way. We have the third lowest gun death rate in the nation. People are surprised to hear that. But if you look at gun death rates, New York is a state of nearly 20 million people. We have the largest city in the country, New York City, and yet our death rate is 4.99 people per 100,000. That still is too high, but compared to the rest of the country, we are the third lowest. The average for the United States is 10 per 100,000. The highest is Alaska and Wyoming. They have 20 deaths per 100,000. You wonder why those states? It's suicide. Nearly 2/3 of the gun deaths in this country are gun suicides.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding you.
2/3?
Nearly 2/3.
Holy cow. Again, if you have a gun, try to call, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to hear from someone who has a gun, if you feel like calling. But we do a careful screen here, make sure we don't have any crazy people on there. But so let me ask you. You said about the death rate. Is it? And I also read somewhere that it's mostly black deaths. Is that true in gun violence?
It's proportionally, yes. Black people and Hispanics die at a greater rate than whites. However, if you look at suicide, then you're looking at a different demographic. You're looking at whites, in particular white males of a particular age.
Okay. So tell us about the SAFE Act. What is that? Okay, so let's focus on, I'll try to talk a little bit more about drones later on again, but let's talk about the SAFE Act in New York, all right? Because you want to spread the ripples from there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the SAFE Act passed. New York was the first state to take action following the Sandy Hook massacre of the 26-year-olds and the teachers who were killed in December of 2012. And Governor Cuomo, to his credit, seized the moment, because every moment like this is political by nature. You know, you act when, you strike when the iron is hot. The iron was very hot. People were shocked about what had happened in Connecticut. That was a game changer. It was a tipping point. In New York, it was in many ways. So there was there were several bills kicking around Albany for years. For example, a stronger assault weapons ban, limiting high-capacity magazines, requiring background checks on all gun sales, renewable permits for pistols. All of those elements made it into the SAFE Act. So the SAFE Act is a composite of all of these different bills, plus there's a requirement to have a background check system for ammunition sales, because a gun without bullets is no good. It can't kill. So those are all elements of the SAFE Act.
So this is one of the outcomes of that horrible tragedy.
It was. And you know, people say, has it worked? Is it working? Well, you know, probably the most significant thing New York did, besides closing the private sale background check loophole, was to pass back in 2000 under Governor George Pataki, who's a Republican, licensing and registration for all handguns.
So let me ask you about the SAFE Act, because when I go up to the Hudson Valley sometimes, there's a
You
little
see a
cabin
lot
up there,
of signs.
there's a lot of signs.
Yeah.
And why is that? Are they anti-SAFE Act?
They think
They
they
want to
are.
re-pull it back? And why is that? Because what's the issue?
Well, what upset the gun owners the most, not all, but some, the most vocal gun
Caller, we'll get
owners,
to you in just a second. Hang on.
was the ban on the military purpose assault weapons. The AR-15s like Adam Lanza used.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm
Right.
actually, that was such a horrible week, because that show we did that Wednesday, our NYC weather dude who attends a school next to there,
Right.
the week before had been out shooting that same gun in a firing range that his father had took him to. And so we actually played that video to show the power of that weapon. So
Absolutely. They were
it's like
designed for the military.
Yes.
And the other thing that upset the gun extremists was the 7-round ammunition limit that Governor Cuomo specified in the SAFE Act. Now, the Governor Cuomo's mistake was actually not to mandate 7-round magazines to go with those 7 rounds. So he did not. He said you can put only 7 bullets in a 10-round magazine, which is, that's kind of silly.
Yeah.
It's like having an egg carton that holds a dozen, only allowing 9 eggs, right? So, I mean, people made fun of that for good reason. I mean, he should have said, you need a 7-round magazine, those need to be made, and 7 bullets go into that 7-round magazine, but he didn't. So actually, that part of the SAFE Act is no longer standing. We're back to 10 rounds, which is still the lowest in the country.
Got it. Caller, are you on the air? Hello?
Tony?
Yes, hello, how are you?
Yes, I will love to see Pierce Brosnan, another Bond film, come back from his retirement. Please.
Okay. You have a question for our guest?
No, I want to see Pierce Brosnan.
Okay, my friend. Thank you so much for calling, okay? Hey, Lorraine, do you have a question for our guest?
I was just wondering if the reason there isn't that much gun violence in New York is because they're using other weapons, like knives.
Well, when if you're intent on committing violence or doing something violent, and you don't have access to a gun, then yeah, sure, you'll use something else. But the thing about a knife or any other weapon, a baseball bat, I'm trying to think of other examples, is they're not as lethal as guns. Guns were designed to kill. Knives were designed to cut, meat or something. Baseball bats to hit a baseball. But guns are actually designed to kill, particularly handguns, to kill human beings. And military purpose assault weapons are definitely designed to kill human beings quickly and efficiently, because they're designed for the battlefield.
So, I want to go back, because we only have like 3 more minutes here. And, Officer Holder was shot last week, and we did a whole show. We dedicated our show to the guy, because it's such a horrible story.
Absolutely.
So, and that gun came from the iron pipeline, or what is this?
Yeah, it's called the iron pipeline. It came from South Carolina, and we know a lot of these guns. The gun that killed the 2 police officers in Brooklyn last December came from a pawn shop in Georgia, Arrowhead Pawn Shop.
And so, what happens to the pawn shop guy? Do we go surround them and watch them every day now, or what?
We should.
What do we do?
What I would appeal to your listeners to do right now is we've been asking for the source data for the crime guns. We know that source data. I mean, the ATF traces crime guns in every.
Oh, they don't release
locality.
it?
Well, they are afraid to release it because every time
The government?
Yes, ATF, because every time they stick their head above the parapet, the Congress cuts off their funding. The
Okay.
ATF is the enforcement agency for gun crimes, and yet they are the only agency that has seen its funding decrease since 9/11.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a couple minutes here. It's about the NRA and their
Yep,
influence and all
that's
that
right, and their
stuff.
influence on
I keep
Congress.
thinking to myself, it's a horrible thought, but one day the leader of the NRA will be assassinated with a gun, and then maybe, and it's a horrible thought, but maybe that would then change. But is it so? They must go around with a lot of security.
They do. They don't allow guns into their annual conventions. They don't allow them into their headquarters.
But someone's
in
going to one
Virginia.
day shoot him on the street by accident, and will they? But is it so ingrained that we're not going to? Even if we take them out of the equation, I guess the point is our Constitution allows it. We're the biggest gun.
Our Constitution
we're the
doesn't
biggest.
allow it. Our Constitution talks about a militia right. The Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the freedom of security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's about a militia right. And until 2008, the Supreme Court and every high court of the United States had interpreted it as a collective militia right, not an individual right. It was Justice Scalia.
Up till when?
Up until 2008. So
But people had guns before 2008.
they did, but it wasn't an individual right. The court interpreted it as an individual right for self-defense in your home to have a gun. It was not that before. The Founding Fathers, if you go back historically, read Michael Waldman's very good book, The Second Amendment, a biography. It was all about a militia right.
Okay, but there's that, and there's the haze around that, and then we're the biggest exporter of arms in the world,
Yep.
and then we were talking about at the top of the show how you got the
You know what it's
advertising on
about?
Black Ops and
it's
computer
about
games.
money. The gun industry wants to sell more guns. They don't care who they sell them to, and they are actually knowingly selling them into the criminal market. The gun ownership rate is declining in America.
So what do we do?
So we individuals get involved in local organizations like ours, state organization, New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. We actually, in September, were successful in getting the Albany Common Council to pass a firearm safe storage law. And we're going to other cities in the state until we get it at the state level.
Can we bring up the slide on the back of her site and try to highlight the event? You have an event this weekend, right? We want to invite people to, right?
It's Joe's Pub, which is the public theater, and Stephanie McKay is a folk singer, and she's going to
I
be
think it's
singing.
down below, yeah.
Yeah, she's going to be singing, performing, that's it.
Yeah.
Joe's Pub to benefit our youth program, and it's $20 to come in. It'll be a nice evening, 7 p.m. at the Public Theater. Come along and join us and support our work.
Okay, so thank you so much for your time. Sorry
Thank
it's been
you.
so quick, but everybody
thank
go
you.
to the pub. Lorraine, thank you for your time, okay?
Thanks a lot, bye.
Yeah, take care. Ryan, thanks for producing. Jordan, thanks for putting us on the air. Thank you, Eminent God. Thank you, caller, although you didn't make a lot of sense. See you next week. Actually, next week's a rerun, ladies and gentlemen. Bye, good night.